When you walk in here, what are the memories that flow?
Well, I mean, this is like a family place for us in a lot of ways, right? I mean, this was the first place my grandfather ever had a political event outside of his home Senate district in Southwest Georgia, you know, and it's, I had my 21st birthday party here. We've had a ton of other birthdays. And, you know, when the Carter family and the Carter administration gets together, they have their reunions here, so.
So is this the reason his relationship with Manuel Maluth, who was then chair of the DeKalb County Commission and owned this facility, was that why the Carter Center was placed where it was, where it is?
If you asked Jimmy Carter for a period of time why the Carter Center is where it is, he would have said to be next to Manuel's, for sure. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that was the claim.
And he was a teetotaler.
Well, he wasn't. He wasn't a teetotaler. He wasn't. No, he would sip some champagne, and he make Bloody Marys in the mornings, and so he had a good time at Manuel's.
When I think about you and your grandfather, you were the first grandchild, and I have this wonderful picture in mind that the center provided that shows you and your Aunt Amy and your grandfather. He's standing on a tree stump. You're up in the tree with Amy. What are your other memories from the White House? You were so young.
I was young, but it's one of those like periods of time where, you know, I've talked about it so much throughout my life that I've kept them, you know, and Amy and I talk about it a little bit, and even lately, about, you know, the times I would go up there just to visit my grandparents. And, you know, they had that tree house built at the White House for basically me and Amy, and my cousin James came soon after, but it was a place where we got together as a family, right? When just because they were living in the White House didn't mean they were different than any other grandparents. They had us up there, and we built snowmen, and we did Easter egg hunts and all that stuff. We just happened to do it on the White House lawn.
When I look at you in the photographs with your grandfather, the smiles are so similar.
His is a lot more famous than mine.
But what is it that his trait that you find in you?
You know, it's funny because lately I've been thinking about the things that are different, right? He had this tireless energy, and I feel like I'm always tired these days. But I'm not the only one who was not able to keep up with Jimmy Carter, right, over time. I think there's the thing that I try to emulate is his respect for other people. And he never looked down on anybody, no matter what your job was, no matter where you came from, no matter your condition. And that's really what I try to do. I mean, I don't know that I'm as successful as him, but to me, if you ask what of him do I see in me, I would hope it's that.
And what about him, you would say, I'm not going to be like Grandpa on that one?
You know, it's funny. We all talk about his integrity and about his honesty and how he really was the same person no matter who he was talking to or where he was or anything else. And I admire that. And I think even my grandmother would say sometimes he needed to curb that honesty a little bit. You know, how do I look in this dress? And he would just be honest. And like, I think maybe I try to limit that a little bit.
What is the quality you took from your grandma?
She was just all love for people. She was just all love, and she was the rock of the family, and you know, she was the best politician in the family, and so she really understood people, I think, in a way that sometimes he understood, you know, concepts and policies and the engineering aspects of getting something done, but she was the one that could truly connect with somebody, and I think that partnership was so complementary and such a remarkable partnership that it really, you know, it was this epic 77-year life of service that they lived together.
It's really hard when you are the spokesperson for the family, and at the same time, you are having to mourn not only the loss of your grandmother a year ago, and now the loss of your grandfather. So how is Jason taking care of himself? You
know, these last few days, it's been really nice because it's just been logistics, right? You know, these things came up. We have this massive funeral operation, which is a blessing for us, and it's a really wonderful way for us to celebrate alongside the American people, alongside people across the globe. We've appreciated that, and I really think it has also been a welcome distraction a little bit, if I'm being honest, to do these things that we need to do, and then we'll have our chance to reflect. I did go by the Carter Center the other night after the processions had ended, and sat there as people were paying their respects, just my wife and I. And there's a little part of that room where you're not on camera. And so we sat in that little part of the room just for ourselves and had a moment. And, you know, even then we were sharing him with the people that were coming through, but that was okay, right? That's how we always knew it was. And it was a nice moment for me and Kate.
You know, I'm worried about when you're going to have time to mourn.
Well, I mean, look, we've got a lot of time. We've got a lot of time, and we have been preparing for this emotionally for a long time, right? One of the benefits of having 2 years almost in hospice care is we've had a chance to reflect and prepare. Of course, it's not the same, but we knew that he was at peace, and that helps us be at peace. And, you know, he was ready, as he said to us, to go be with Rosalind.
So how much was he involved in the planning of his funeral? And the reason I ask is Bernstein Hollis told me that 20 years ago he told her he wanted her to pray.
That's 100% true. He you know, when you live to be 100, you plan your funeral for a long time. And so he, you know, they were involved in it. You know, there's a piece of it, you know, the interesting piece for us about a state funeral. As I understand this process, they only do this, a full state funeral, if you held the presidency, and that's pretty much it. Those are the people for whom this country does this. And so once he decided that we would have this state funeral, there were some pieces of it that they got to plan, and they put their minds together, and they put it together. But it's a really interesting process that this is what we do, and we do it only for presidents.
Now, I know you're going to be speaking in Washington, but first I'm going to talk about your speech here to the Carter employees. You got a little emotional.
You know, I was looking out at that room of people, and it is people who worked with him and really have given their lives to his legacy. And as we watch this human being, right, that we all knew as Pawpaw, we watched him grow and build this legacy. What we sometimes forget is, obviously he wasn't doing that alone, right? The Carter Center has 3,500 employees that are out there living out this legacy of Jimmy Carter. And so as I sat in that room and I looked out at some of those folks and saw the tears in their eyes, and really it's for the work that they do, I got choked up. But we share my grandfather, my family, with a variety of people, and I think the ones at the Carter Center that have worked with him for 40 years are the ones that really we feel the closest to.
Well, you know, everybody wants to know how your dad Jack's doing, how Jeff and Chip and Amy are doing. How are they getting through this?
You know, I think they're great. I mean, you know, my dad is a caregiver right now in his life with his wife. And then Amy and Chip and Jeff and my Aunt Becky have really spent this last time for the last 22 months, you know, going back and forth to Plains and really both connecting, but also feeling that burden of being caregivers, right, for my grandfather. And so I think as they've been preparing for it, they've really experienced these last few days much more than the rest of us. But I think they're doing well, and I think they've all had a real chance to bring some closure and some peace to their relationship with their father.
When you walked in the restaurant, so many people, the ladies at the table, grabbed you and hugged you. How does that help you?
Yeah, you know, I mean, again, we share my grandfather with the world in many ways, but that love is mutual, right? Like, we feel that outpouring of support. It's wonderful for me to have people stop me on the street and say, I'm praying for you. You know, to have people stop and say, I'm praying for your grandfather. And it's been happening, you know, and just when we drove up from Plains in the funeral procession, you know, the roads were lined with people. The overpasses on 75 were lined with people. And some of them had stopped their cars by the side of the road and were saluting. And others were holding signs and just waving. And it really is just a remarkable support for all of us and an uplifting for all of us that's really wonderful.
So in Washington, I know you'll be speaking. Can you share some of your remarks, or are you still working on them?
I'm still working on them. I mean, you know, I worked on them for a long time. And so we have, it's hard to try to sum him up in any sort of way, but especially in a small personal eulogy like we're going to deliver. So I'm still working on it, but I think really what you'll hear from me is what I think you saw from him, which is him living out his faith, living out his love for his family, but also for the world. And I think that's going to be the subject of the eulogy, because in my mind, that's the subject of his life.
Now, I know you can't tell me who else is speaking, because I know the Secret Service is involved with who's coming, and all of that.
Yeah.
But what was the criteria used to select the people who will be on the program?
Thankfully, I had nothing to do with it. My grandmother and my grandfather sat down, and they wanted to build a tribute that they liked. And so much of it, you know, they've been thinking about it for so long. You'll be able to see on the program that, you know, his close relationship with Walter Mondale, with Gerald Ford, some of these folks that have already passed. And, you know, it's a complicated thing to be 100. Because, you know, he's really the only one from his generation who is left. And so you'll see some of that, you'll see multi-generations, but it's really the program that my grandparents wanted.
For 38 years, your grandfather was over at Emory University having his annual meeting with students where they could ask him anything. He was open and honest. He taught classes. But I understand during COVID that you had to do a virtual session and that he gave you some advice. Do you remember what it was?
Well, here's the only thing that he ever told me. He said, we will do this Emory Town Hall, but you have to answer any question. You have to answer it honestly, no matter what the question is. And I thought, that's actually hard. You know, I don't know if I want to do that. And it's interesting because we've been recruiting people to come to this Emory Town Hall, and it's amazing how hard it is to find somebody who will sit in front of you and say, I will answer your question honestly, no matter what you ask.
So what is the burden and what is the best of being the first grandchild of Rosalind and Jimmy Carter?
You know, there's not really a burden that I perceive. It has been such a wonderful blessing for me. The life that I have led, the grandchildren that he had, all of us feel this same sort of connection to him and feel it as a blessing. And I think the remarkable thing to me is that my children, who are 18 and 16, you know, they are two little, you know, Atlanta public school boys, and he would take them out into the fields in South Georgia to teach them about row crops and wild plums, and the relationship that he got to have with his great-grandchildren, to me, was probably the biggest blessing.
The best story you will remember about your grandfather in a moment? You know, we all have that one thing that'll come to us.
I have two, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And they're just little personal things. I remember two very early morning phone calls. And one of them was this early morning phone call. And when you get a call at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're worried that something bad has happened. And I answered one, and my grandmother said, "Did you hear the news?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Papa won the Nobel Peace Prize." And I got up that day, and I had some things I needed to do, and I decided about halfway through the day that I was just going to go down to Plains. And I just drove down there, and he was sitting on the couch and, you know, sipping champagne and just answering the phone as people were calling to tell him congratulations. And eventually my grandmother walked in, and this is part of their tirelessness, and she sort of looked over at him, and he was still basically in his pajamas, like shorts and a t-shirt, and I was sitting there with him, and she said, "Jimmy, you just going to sit on that couch all day?" And I think for the first time in his life, he said, "I think I will." The other early morning phone call, honestly, was about the Atlanta Braves. If you want to hear that one, I'll tell it to you. But, so I get this early phone call from my grandfather, and he and I are baseball fans, and he was a real Braves fan, as you know, and lived and died by it. And this is some years ago, but I get this call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he said, it's my grandfather. He said, "Jason, have you heard the news?" And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "They traded Craig Kimbrell." And I thought, Papa, I mean, he loved this closer. You know, you get to watch Craig Kimbrell because if he's pitching, the Braves are winning, and, you know, nobody can hit him, and he was just like a kid. So excited to have this, be a fan of this pitcher. And, you know, when they traded him away, he was sad. I mean, it just shows you the playfulness, but also just the real person. Anyway.
So the last thing I'm going to ask you is the most difficult question for me to ask.
All right.
But I have to ask it.
Sure.
Only because it's bugging me.
Yeah.
The president-elect had been extremely critical of your grandfather and had even called him the worst president. And then he said he's coming to the funeral. How are you all dealing with that?
You know, it's funny that you say it like that. We've all said bad things about a lot of politicians. You know, we've campaigned against many of the people who are coming to the funeral and had political disagreements with people who will be at the funeral. But this is something that's just bigger than politics. It's bigger than politics, and I'm so appreciative, frankly, that President Trump will be there to just demonstrate to all of us that this country is bigger than one person, that, you know, we celebrate these presidents as human beings, and they all embody us as a nation, for better or for worse, for the period of time that they're in office. And so I think my grandfather would be happy, and that if the shoe was on the other foot, there's no doubt that if my grandfather could be there for Donald Trump's second inauguration, he would have been there.
So when I look at you, I see your faith. I see your constant care for the legacy of your family. The big thing for your family was every year at Christmas and New Year's getting together. How is that tradition going to continue?
Yeah, we've had this, one of the great benefits of having this funeral process for the family is for 40 years we all got together with my grandparents on a Carter family trip, we called it. We started to make t-shirts for the Carter family trips, you know, for different years. And this last great gift of his was to bring us together at this same time of year. Here it's New Year's, we're starting off, and it really has reminded us just how important it is to be close as a family. And so I think we'll continue that, and we'll have to come up with our own traditions. And by the way, this family is now so big with great-grandchildren and cousins and everybody else that it might be difficult. But the closeness that we have is a real gift from my grandparents. It's that love story again.
Well, my prayers are with you, and I hope the next few days you'll be able to get through it. More importantly, after that, I really hope, Jason, you take some time for yourself.
Well, thank you so much. We, you know, none of us are ever only doing one thing at a time. And this moment comes at a time in my family that's difficult, even without all of this. And we haven't talked about it much, but as we go through this celebration of this great, gigantic legacy, the thing that that family remembers is that it is just a single human life. And even when he was here and we were able to see him sort of on a daily basis, it reminded us that he was a regular guy. And now that he's gone, it's harder and harder to look back at this incredible set of achievements and think of him as just our grandfather. But all of us remember it that way. And I think as we move forward, we're all just blessed with that human connection. That's what the family gets that other people don't get, is the real, true knowledge that he's just like the rest of us.